Hello everyone, this is Hyper ASMR. I know it's kind of a funny name, but it works with my main channel's name, which is Hyperico17. One of my lovely friends suggested that I give ASMR a try because he said my voice was perfect for that. So I'm really glad that he encouraged me to do that, because I really do enjoy the ASMR community. So I want to give back by starting off with just a soft spoken tapping and a little bit of scratching in some cases. There's also paper turning in this one. But today I want to show you guys my Persona Q Shadow of the Labyrinth art book. I'll have a few pictures up, so then if you guys want to see what I'm referring to, you can watch the video. Or if you just want to listen in and hear my voice, that's okay as well. Anything you'd like to do would be just beautiful and wonderful. So, I'm going to start by talking about the cover, which is one of my favorite parts of the art book. I don't know if you can hear this, but it makes such beautiful sounds. And if you can't tell, it's such a lovely tapping noise too. It's pretty thin in comparison to some textures of art books. But that's okay, because my favorite part, if you take a look at it, there are some thin lines that are kind of embossed that are a spider web. And that's what makes such a lovely noise, are those embossed spider webs. Well, spider web. And then what I also like is that the logo is very wavy, very curvy. It's got a very shiny it's a shiny texture is the best way I can describe it. It's very smooth as well. And it kind of reminds me of Scooby-Doo, the style of it. But let's go to the first page, shall we? On the first page, you'll see a table of contents, which has a very enlarged photo of Nanako, who's from Persona 4. If you've never played Persona 4, the main character goes to live with his uncle and cousin, and Nanako is his cousin. And she's very, very sweet. And everyone in Persona, both Persona 3 and 4, they have an arcana of the tarot cards that represents each of those persons that the main character can interact with. And the one that Nanako represents is Justice, which I think is very fitting for her personality. But if we move on, there's a special message from the director of the game, and I'm going to read that to you. A special message from the director. I thank you from the bottom of my heart for purchasing Persona Q. This was the first RPG to bring together characters from Persona 3 and Persona 4, and also the first collaboration between Etrian Odyssey series and the Persona series. Because of this, there were many challenges during development, but the staff of both series banded together, supported one another, and delivered a game that captures the essence of the two series. Our goal is to make games that are not just good, but have lasting appeal. Games that stick in the heart of their players and influence them in some way. I sincerely hope Persona Q is such a game for you. Daisuke Kaneda. I think that's quite lovely, don't you think? To have someone so thankful. That's what I like about the Japanese culture. They're just very thankful, very hospitable, very kind. I don't think I've ever met a rude person from Japan. I think rambunctious and outgoing, but never rude. But let's read some of the descriptions of the characters. Unfortunately, there's not any production art, which I like a lot in art books, but it is kind of nice to know that they have little blurbs on each of the characters. The first character is the Persona 3 hero, which has a little asterisk, and it says in Persona Q, the Persona 3 hero's name can be changed. So it could be your name, or it could be a friend's of yours name. Or there are also, for both of the heroes, just generally accepted names for the Persona 4 and Persona 3 characters. I've never played Persona 3, so I don't know them all that well. But you have the Persona 3 hero. On the next page, it's Yukari Takeba. She has ice powers. She has wind powers. Wind and support powers. So she has healing powers. And next is Fuka Yamagishi. She has backup abilities, which means that she doesn't really fight, but she gives support in the game. And I actually like having her as my support in battle, because she has an ability that heals you. And I sometimes forget to place a healer in my party when I'm playing Persona Q. So, I like having Fuka as my backup, usually. And then there's Junpei. Not a lot of people like Junpei. I think just because he's very straightforward. And also, a lot of people don't like his voice actor either. But I think it's fitting for his personality. So it's okay. Mitsuru Kirijo. She is my favorite character, tied with one other, from Persona 3, at least based on the personality that I see in Persona Q. I've never played Persona 3. One of these days I will. I like Mitsuru a lot. And I think it's very funny that, in the Japanese version of Persona 3 and in Persona Q, and in any Persona game that Mitsuru has shown up in, because I know she's in Persona 4 Arena, and as well as Ultimax, I believe. And in the Japanese version, she speaks different phrases in English, very clear English, but in the English translations, she speaks French, very beautiful French, I might add. Like, for example, in Persona Q, if her persona levels, she says, "C'est magnifique." And I think it's quite lovely and interesting that they have that, and it makes me wonder if in other translations, like if there are other language translations that they use a different language, like if they have it in French, what language does Mitsuru know besides French? Maybe back to English, I'm not sure. The next, this is the popular character amongst my friends, which is Akihiko Sanada. He is a boxer, which you can tell by the bandage on his forehead. He gets very roughed up. Now this character is also my favorite. Her name is Aigis. I like her little description here. I'll read that to you. A robotic weapon with persona abilities. She was given a heart in order to become a persona user. She seems to have a separate task. It's very mysterious. I wish I had played Persona 3 so I know what that task is. But I like Aigis a lot. She has a personality that is very sarcastic, but unfortunately she has a very robotic voice. So when she says sarcastic comments, it sometimes doesn't come across as sarcastic, but I still find it funny because I like sarcastic humor. And I like Aigis for that. Because I think if she had a less robotic voice, I think people would understand her more. But since she's a robot first and human second, therefore I call her an android. But I think others would argue with me on that. But that's okay. They can have their opinions. The next we have Shinjiro. He's very serious looking. But I think he has a very interesting blurb here where he talks about that he's taking time off from high school, which is a very cultural difference, since applying to a high school is very similar to applying to a college here in America. It's very, very difficult to get into high schools in Japan, and they're almost treated as such. And, which is why, I think applying to high schools is such a big deal in Japan, and why a high school education is also very important in Japan. Just because they're so hard to get into, at least for nicer high schools. And since Gekkokan is a private high school, it makes sense that it would be very difficult to get into. Though I have to say, I think it's unwise of Shinjiro to take time off, just because I think education is very important. And I think his friends would say that too. Next is Ken Amada, and he's in 5th grade. He's the youngest of their group. And they have a club called C's. I can't remember off the top of my head what it is, but it's their club at Gekkokan High that sort of is their exclusive Persona user club that helps them try to defeat Tartarus, which emerges out of their school and releases shadows, which are the monsters that they defeat in Persona. And he is the youngest of the humans, I guess I should say. Because then next we have Koromaru, who is Shiba Inu. He's a dog. But the thing that's most interesting about Koromaru is, at least to me, because Persona 3, I think a lot of people are turned off by the Persona series because of Persona 3. Simply because they have something called an invoker, which is how they summon their persona. But their invokers are shaped like guns, and so it looks very morbid when they use their invoker, because they have to shoot themselves in the head with their invoker, and that is how they summon their persona, which is very morbid looking when you don't have any context of the game. So you think that these poor characters are shooting themselves in the head, but they're not. They're shooting their spirit out, which allows them to summon their personas. And poor Koromaru, his invoker is a shock collar. That's just really sad to me. But I think what makes up for it is his cute little vest with wings on it. Next we have the Persona 4 characters. And like I said before, the Persona 4 hero, you can name him whatever you want. You can name both of them in Persona Q. I just named mine off of the popular names for the characters. Well, not in my first file, because I didn't know what the popular name for the Persona 3 protagonist was, because I had never played it. And I never was really interested in it, because it was too depressing for my taste. And that's very interesting to say about the comparisons in that Persona 4 is better, especially when you hear the context of Persona 4 being, it's a bunch of high schoolers trying to solve a serial murder case. How can it get more morbid than that, right? But Persona 4 is a very lighthearted game, which you can tell the contrast between the Persona 3 and Persona 4 palettes. Because Persona 3 has the dark blues and the light blues, and then Persona 4 has the yellows and a couple of grays. And then on the next page here, Yosuke Hanamura. I like Yosuke, he's funny. However, I think he's the better comic relief out of the two comic relief characters. Just because I like his humor much better than the quote-unquote mascot character in Persona 4. And then there's Yukiko Amagi. She reminds me very much so of my best friend, Jessica. Just simply because sometimes she's very cold without meaning to, or sometimes she does mean so. Yukiko doesn't mean it, but Jessica definitely chooses when to be cold and when not, and then sometimes is cold subconsciously. But I like Yukiko a lot. I think what's even funnier is that Yukiko is very morbid in some cases. But then if you look at her best friend, Chie Satonaka, who I think in some ways reminds me a lot of myself, just simply because of the relationship between her and Yukiko. And how they sort of protect each other. But Yukiko is the shyer of the two, which makes sense between Jessica and I. And Chie is very outgoing and quite tough on the surface, but is very sensitive and easily frightened, just like I am. I put on a tough front, but I get very scared very easily. And also, Chie and I have a love for protein. Well, meat, I guess I should say. Because I love steak. I could eat steak every day. Steak and sushi. I could eat those 24/7 and not get sick of it. And then we have Rise Kujikawa. She's my favorite character in Persona 4. Just simply because she and I are just very similar in that we're both bubbly and outgoing and sometimes without meaning to. We're very perverted. I think she means it a lot of times. I'm sorry, I just love the sound that the paper makes. I like the texture of this paper. It's very crisp. I think mostly because it's brand new. And then we have another serious face with Kanji. He's my favorite of the male characters. Because he's very serious as a front, but he's very shy and sensitive. He's also good at cooking and sewing. He's sort of a housewife in disguise. I don't know, and I like when characters break those boundaries of the gender sphere. And this is my friend Jessica's favorite character in Persona 4, Naoto Shirogane. I like her too, but I have not finished the game of Persona 4 just yet, so I haven't gotten to experience Naoto in full, but based off of what I've seen, what I know so far in the game, just simply just knowing about her in general, I really like her. Though there is, at least on my end, there is some confusion, I believe, of how Naoto sees herself, because she's called the Detective Prince because of something in Persona 4 that's described. I guess this isn't really a spoiler, the game's been out for a long time, but Naoto was originally referred to as a boy, but you find out it's because she's very insecure about the job field she wants to go into, which is the police work. However, women aren't highly respected in that field, and I would assume so even more in Japan, simply because they're very traditional, so there are some traditional values in place, which is unfortunate, but she does learn to accept herself, and that is how she earns her persona. And in Persona 4, that's what it's mostly about, is accepting something deep and dark that maybe you know exists, but you don't want to admit, or something that maybe you hadn't fully discovered yet, and that's why you couldn't admit it to yourself, because it hadn't been apparent. And I believe that of all the personas, that it's about discovering who you are and your relationship with others, and how that helps in life in general. And then we have Teddy, who's a lovable mascot, on the surface at least. He's very wily on the inside. A lot of people like him. I'm not so much a fan, just because I think his humor is a little bland for my taste. But I understand where people enjoy his humor, and it's okay if that's what you're into. It's just not my cup of tea. Then we go into the two new characters, Ray and Zen. I love their character drawings. Ray is eating a corn dog. And she's always eating, no matter what. Usually she's depicted eating her corn dog, like in her artwork here. Or she's eating a donut, or takoyaki. And takoyaki is traditionally linked with fair food. It's like very salty. It's very funny to see her eating, and she also makes food puns. Or I guess they're food play on words. Like for example, in the current Labyrinth that I'm playing in Persona Q, it's a haunted house theme. And Chie gets very scared, and she's saying a prayer to protect them. And she's chanting, "Deliver us from evil." And Ray imitates her, but instead she says, "Deliver us some pizza." She does little things like that, where she'll take words and just switches them around like that. And Zen's character is slightly more simple. He just is very protective of Ray, and he wants to take care of her, though he's oblivious to how Ray feels about him. Then we have the Velvet Room residents, who help you on your journey by way of selling you items, healing you, or helping you create your personas. But then you have Marie, who is the newest character, who visits the Velvet Room, and I haven't been introduced to her yet, but she's from Persona 4 Golden, the updated version of Persona 4. So I don't know much about her, except for that she likes poetry, and she likes writing it. And we have the design of one of the bosses. I'm assuming he's the last boss, because I haven't met him yet. And the three previous bosses from the first, second, and third Labyrinth. And then it gave us a preview of the downloadable personas that you could get. The art is quite lovely. It looks like some of these are actually 3D models placed onto the pages. That's lovely too. And these are some original Japanese stills of the game, simply because some of the signs are translated in the game for English. But as you can see in this still here that I have up on the screen, it's all in Japanese, except for a few phrases. But it's because in Japan they like to bring English into their everyday language. And that's the entrance to the first dungeon. Fortune-telling works as the entrance to the Velvet Room. The Leftover Deli is a place that some of the characters meet. I haven't been to the Enova Pride exhibit or the Sweets Hell, though they do have the Sweets Hell as a backdrop sometimes in the strolls. Strolls are basically just side conversations that happen, just usually for fun, little cutscenes that are very interesting. Then we have the Group Date Cafe. That's the second labyrinth. And then the Evil Spirit Club, and that's a haunted house. That's the one I'm currently on. It's very hard, especially since I usually play at night. So I sometimes get scared because of the eerie background and just the overall ambiance is very scary, and some of the monsters that you encounter are also very scary looking. There are some jump scares. I get scared very easily, so if I don't recall where they are, I just jump in fear. Let's go on to some of the illustrations here. This is a fun one to begin with. You have Ray with all of her takoyaki. Elizabeth and Margaret. They look like they're eating as well. And they're from the Velvet Room. I forgot to name them. Then you have Marie, who has a plate of donuts, who's trying to pull them away since poor Theodore is spilling his drink and his burger and fries because Koromaru got excited. If you've ever had a dog, you know that sometimes they get very excitable, especially if there's human food around, because they'll beg off of you. Then next we have the two Persona protagonists, Yukari, Chie, Ray and Zen, and they're all very beat up. Let's see, if you look at the Persona 3 protagonist here, he has his invoker pointed to his head, and in Persona 4 their invokers are in the shape of cards, because they just crush the cards, and it makes a glass-shattering sound effect, much less morbid than the gun-shaped invokers. This is my favorite out of the Persona Q art that is in this book. We have Kanji here, and he's smiling because he has Koromaru, because he thinks Koromaru is very cute. But poor Koromaru, he just wants to go away. He is not a happy puppy. He doesn't like Kanji that much, unfortunately. And poor Ken is trying to communicate that to Kanji, but I think Kanji's far too content with the cuteness of Koromaru to care. And then you have Aigis, who is being studied by Naoto. Naoto loves robots. Actually, if you play through the game, her dungeon to obtain her persona is a secret hideout, and the final boss is a robot. It's her character as a robot, and she talks about really enjoying robots. Excuse me, I burped. I had Chinese food this evening, and it makes me burp a lot. And then this was shown a lot for the official poster for Persona Q, and it has the whole cast, all the playable and some non-playable characters. And my favorite detail is the little notebook that's introduced in the first labyrinth, because you're asked to keep track of the maps for all of the areas. And the last piece here is in the Evil Spirit Club dungeon. inspiration, and Zen is trying to be helpful with creating the map it looks like since it has the notebook. The Persona 4 protagonist, and he's studying the map. The Persona 3 protagonist looks confused, and Mitsuru is trying to protect poor Rei because she's scared. I know how she feels. Because if you look at the art a little closer, there's handprints on the floor. And when you're playing the actual game, if you stand still, the handprints appear in disappearance. And when you're hearing the eerie music, it's very unsettling, especially when you play it at night. I speak from experience. And then there's credits at the end. Just credits for the game, and thanking everyone, it looks like. That's how I view credits, is that it's a thank you. And we have the back cover here with more of the spider web. Then the Atlas logo. Well, I hope you enjoyed looking at this art book with me. It was so lovely for you to join me this evening. Thank you so much. And if it's daytime where you are, have a lovely day. If it's nighttime, like it is for me right now,